Sparta, 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 keep your eyes closed, Sparta, send in your way back, Sparta, sit and relax, Sparta, gaze a little bit down, Sparta, enjoy the show, wave in motions of the spine, drink a glass wine, Sparta, 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 Sparta.
Hello and welcome to the Sparta lecture series. Today's guest is Monira Al Qadiri, who's going to talk about the narrative constructions of her works, which are constantly influenced by biographical and historical references. And we're super excited about her presentation and think that her works look super nice in our Sparta interface.
Hi Monira, live from Berlin.
Hi.
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 Do you like our virtual environment?
Yeah, I think it's very cool.
Thank you. Okay, let's directly start, and afterwards there will be a Q&A session, and the link is already in the description of the video. And you can start now.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Monira Al Qadiri. I'm a visual artist from Kuwait. I was born in Dakar in Senegal, and then I moved to Kuwait when I was a baby. In 1999, I moved to Tokyo, Japan, for 10 years. And then I came back to Kuwait in 2010. I went to Beirut in 2011 in Lebanon, and then Amsterdam, and now I'm based in Berlin. So I'm a bit of a nomad, you can say. Nice to meet you all. Today I want to show you a few of my works and share a quite big chunk of my background with you, so you can get a sense of my overall practice, and maybe we can enter into a discussion afterwards. These days I work mostly in sculpture, video, performance, or all three mixed together. But deep down, very long time ago, I'm originally a painter and a lover of animation. So I think if you concentrate long enough on my work, you will see that kind of painterly animated aspect of it, even if it's kind of totally made from a different medium. And also my work is generally highly biographical. It's like one giant self-portrait, even if, like I said, the medium or the narrative looks more abstract. On the surface, it's really a representation of self. And that's really an integral aspect of what I do. I use myself and my story as a kind of microcosm for bigger issues and much more kind of serious and pressing subjects. I think today the theme is to kind of highlight the storytelling aspect of art and art making. So I'm going to jump into that from different angles. Firstly, I'm going to present, why do I use myself as kind of a medium for my work, and how did I come to this place? And why I place also kind of such importance on the concept of kind of embodiment and embodying my concepts kind of physically. And I'm going to take you first on a kind of very personal journey of how I got here. So I'm going to start. I grew up in Kuwait in the 80s and 90s. Many people are not very familiar with my country because it's so small and obscure. It's that little green dot in the middle of the map. It's also a very kind of conservative, inward-looking, and extremely patriarchal place. That's honestly very difficult to grow up in as a young person. You're restricted in so many ways. That's just a fact of life. So naturally, the first thing I did in order to kind of feel free and liberated in my own skin was to start cross-dressing. This is me when I was 15 years old. And my sister, Fatima, she used to take photographs of me, and she actually collected them into this work which is titled Bored 1997, which is exactly what it was. We were bored in 1997. um, yeah, and that's kind of what I used to do all the time growing up there. And I guess what distinguishes Kuwait from its kind of very, all these wealthy neighbors in that Gulf region was that Kuwait went through a war in 1990. The country was invaded overnight, and the scene of a dictator's birthday party was playing on TV for the whole duration of the war. And I was 7 years old at the time. And at this tender age, this kind of event changes you in ways you can't really comprehend until much later. I think more than anything, that constant feeling of chaos and possibility of death also all around you just warps your mind and starts to play tricks on you for as long as you live. For me, I really started kind of watching cartoons, Japanese cartoons at this time, as a form of escapism. And my favorite one was about this noodle eating ninja named Kabomaru, which basically means hippo boy. And yeah, he was just running around eating noodles and doing crazy things. And it was dubbed in Arabic. And I thought the voice acting was so incredible as well. And during that time, I really thought I was Kabomaru, the ninja. And I even felt he looked like me. He has this tanned skin and thick black hair. And I really thought it kind of mirrored my own. And I ran around the house pretending to be him. And as a result of this obsession, I moved to Japan after finishing school. And many years later, I turned this kind of whole experience into a theater performance named Feeling Dubbing, where I act out this episode of my life. You can play the video now if you like, Till. Yeah. I went to Japan when I was 16 years old, and I was obsessed with Japanese cartoons. And the moment I arrived there, I became uninterested in cartoons, and I didn't know why. I mean, I love the images, but there was something else that was really intriguing me, which was the voice acting behind the images. And I used to watch these cartoons. They were dubbed in Arabic, and I watched the original cartoon in Japan, and I didn't like it. It was terrible, and I missed the dramatic nature of the Arabic voice acting. So I started becoming also obsessed with this voice, and who is this voice, and where does it come from, and what's the historical background. So when I left Japan, I decided to go to Beirut, where I met one of these voice actors, Wahid Jalal, who's a 77-year-old man, and he works in the radio station. And I approached him with this project, and I told him, I want to, could you please read this text which is about my life story, but in a way it's also about you, and it's about you as a voice actor and what you've done to all these millions of Arab children, and how you've affected their subconscious with your theatrical voice. Most of the time the puppet is acting me, and Wahid Jalal, the voice, is acting the puppet. So it's a triple puppetry. Back to me. So this preoccupation to kind of become the thing that I like and I adore, and to embody it, stems also from my obsession with a Japanese writer named Yukio Mishima. When I was a young teenager, as you can tell by now, I was preoccupied with all things Japanese at the time. And Mishima preached that in order for you to become an honest artist whose expression is pure and real, you must at some point become your art, or at least to kind of transform yourself into it, so that there is kind of no distance between you and what you are making. And him personally, he was obsessed with beauty, because I think he really believed that he wasn't attractive. And he found beauty to be kind of overpowering to the point that it suffocated him. And he wrote many stories and novels about this. And as he got older, he wanted to become more and more beautiful himself. So he started bodybuilding. And he was also a closeted homosexual and a very controversial character. At the end of his life, he took over he hijacked the Japanese army headquarters and gave a speech, and everybody laughed at him. So he committed suicide in public, and it's all over national television. But anyway, if you want to know more about him, I suggest you watch the amazing film Mishima, A Life in Four Chapters by Paul Schrader. I think it's one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. This is a clip of Mishima speaking in English about his concepts of beauty.
And I think the brutality might come from our feminine aspect, and elegance comes from our nervous side. Sometimes we are too sensitive about refinement or elegance or sense of beauty of such aesthetic side. And sometimes we are tired of it. And we need sometimes a sudden explosion to make us free from it. And for instance, after the war, our brutal side was completely hidden. But I believe it is just hidden, I think.
Anyway, getting back to my influences, my mother is also an artist. Her name is Thuraya Al-Baksami. And her works were basically all over the house when I was growing up. And strangely enough, there were always paintings of people, which in itself is a controversial subject in the Muslim world, because in some extreme interpretations of Islam, drawing or painting images of people, humans, animals is bad. It's seen as a kind of, it's frowned upon. Mainly because it's seen as something that inspires idolatry. They call it shirk billah, which means a kind of polytheism, or worshiping several idols at once instead of one god. So many artists, I think, locally kind of shied away from depicting figures in their work, except for my mom, who was never made a single work without a figure in it. And mainly, I think, because she was a writer as well, she always kind of imbued this sense of like story and fantasy about characters and people and their backgrounds and their moods. So each work really had this kind of persona in it, almost like a, it's a story, And I think digesting this over the years, it really heavily influenced my conception of art and what art should be. This is me standing in a Japanese cemetery in 2007. I think maybe you can see some similarities between my mom's painting and what I was trying to do here, except that it's a kind of flipped gender roles going on. My mother really was into kind of feminine subjects, all female paintings. I mean, that one I showed you is maybe the only one that has a male figure in it. But for me, it was completely the opposite. I'm obsessed with masculinity and masculine figures and personas. So I don't know if that was a reaction, who knows? And I have a music video series called Music to My Tears, where I act the role of these male singers. So I use these very old folkloric Arabic songs and I act the role of the singer. And everything in these videos is kind of mismatching and wrong, and my beard looks fake and all the decor is really cheap and everything doesn't work somehow. But in the end, it creates this strangely beautiful picture. And I returned to Kuwait from Japan in 2010 after spending a decade in Tokyo, and I felt at the end of it that I was kind of broken and lost, and because of this kind of cultural mutant I had become. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I was an alien in Japan, as my ID card literally stated the word alien. And now I'm an alien in my own country, and I'm just someone from outer space. And suddenly at that time, I got a commission to make a public monument in Dubai. And even though I have never worked in sculpture before, you can say it was kind of an alien medium to me. I really thought, long and hard about what art in public space should mean and should do. And public monuments in the Gulf really look kind of almost all identical in terms of thematics. There's kind of a conceptual strain that runs through all of them, the all prevalent pearl diving boat that you can see here, because pearl diving was the main industry before the advent of oil for hundreds of years, basically. And then there's the traditional coffee pot, and all different kinds of manners of camels and camels and camels. And of course, things like falcons as well, or a kind of an abstract amalgamation of all of these things together with some calligraphy. And if you notice, they're all kind of placed in these traffic locations in the middle of these roundabouts, which are kind of colonial remnants of British road design. And where your kind of car can move around the sculpture, and you can see it from all different angles, but you can never touch it or get close to it. So there's always this distance between the people and these sculptures. In Kuwait, we also had some war memorials for quite a short time, I would say. Like this one, which is quite interesting. There was a story about the sheikh who stood up to the invading forces, and they killed him in his car. So they actually used his original car in the sculpture, which was a Cadillac, and they put this fist through the roof as a kind of symbol of his defiance. And I really kind of remember this sculpture, but I think people just forgot about it. And at some point it disappeared. And I found this blog post once where someone was asking, hey, what happened to that sculpture? And you can see, I think, because people don't really interact with them, there is no kind of intimate relationship between the public and these artifacts. And I mentioned also that people's idea of figuration in sculpture is quite tricky in that context. But going back to pearl diving and pearls in general, after returning from Japan, I really started thinking about history a lot, and also oil and petroleum and how it changed kind of the culture completely, and also erased large chunks of the historical narrative of the region. I felt like, this kind of obsession with the pearl is somehow artificial, that, oil is really what symbolizes the culture now. It's changed our urban landscape, our cities, our lives, our bodies, our minds. And it's funny because nobody in the region really likes to talk about it. They really treat it like this a secret entity that is like this metaphysical substance that's making everybody wealthy somehow. And shielding, I think, their eyes from its inner workings and realities, because I think it exposes the fragility of kind of the status of oil, because it's unsustainable, obviously. And I think also the state wants to kind of beautify or erase a little bit the history of poverty in the region by kind of sanitizing this history that makes it more palpable to the public. Before oil, groups of men only, would go out to sea for months on end looking for tiny, tiny pearls in the sea, while eating very badly, getting sick, sometimes drowning, dying, just so they could get by. They sang on the boats as a kind of labor music to keep themselves sane for the kind of long and arduous work on the water. I'll just show you a clip of what that sounds like. And actually, my own grandfather was a singer on a pearl diving boat. He died before I was born, so I never heard him sing personally. But I imagined like he sounded something like this.
لغاف انهدم والراس مقلوب من كثر الغرام انهدما
There's actually this book from the 1930s by an Australian explorer named Alan Villiers. And according to my father, at least, he supposedly, Alan, met my grandfather and wrote about him in this book. And I'm going to read a short excerpt of what he said. The musician was a large Arab with fierce eyes and a black mustache who played a guitar which looked as if it might have come from Europe. I learned later that it had actually been bought in Basra. He probably played very well according to Arab ideas of music, but unfortunately those ideas were not mine. And he made matters worse by singing endlessly in an unnatural rasping voice. Whatever it was he was singing, it seemed so excellent to his listeners, but I could have done without it. Ali whispered to me that he was a famous singer from Kuwait, but even this advertisement of his fame did not make his singing any more bearable. So it's just this very funny book. Which I find kind of strange but necessary reading, because it's unfortunate that a lot of the literature that kind of documents daily life at this time comes from these colonial era explorers. But I mean, given that a big part of the populace was illiterate at the time and communication was mostly oral, it's very difficult to trace those oral histories in such a kind of animated way. And these books always read like a diary or a blog, which makes them quite accessible and descriptive of the kind of day-to-day comings and goings. Anyhow, going back to the public sculpture, I wanted to create something that kind of merged myself and my life as a kind of post-oil baby and my grandfather's life in order to create some kind of continuity of narrative in public space. And unfortunately, in the beginning, I found kind of zero connections for the longest time, I felt like his life was a fiction that somebody made up in an advertising agency. But then I really discovered this radical kind of formal link. I found out that pearls and oil, have the same kind of iridescent color scheme. It just ranges from lighter to darker sides of the color spectrum. And I also discovered the perfect form with which to coat with this dichroic color, it's called. Oil drills. If you've never seen the shape of an oil drill out of context, you probably wouldn't recognize them as being part of a machine. They look like some marine creature or jewelry or alien body part. They usually are covered in gold and diamonds to help them dig better. So aesthetically also, they're really, wonderful to look at. And so my first public sculpture, Alien Technology, was born. It's a very oversized giant oil drill that was placed next to pearl diving boats in a heritage village in Dubai. And it was actually the perfect setting for the work because, I couldn't have asked for a better place to put this work because I really felt like this drill is a representation of me. It's really a self-portrait and the boat is my grandfather. And no matter how kind of jarring this image is and how different we are as people, that we are inhabiting the same space in a kind of harmonious way. And the title of the work, Alien Technology, also comes from oil itself. I imagined that oil was like an alien that landed there. And it transformed the place where it landed. It mutated the city's lands and culture, and everything was never to be the same again. But one day, also like an alien, it will depart and will leave an indelible mark behind it. And as an artist, I am busy making those marks visible. Unfortunately, this iteration of the work was destroyed. I'm not going to go into the details. But I recreated it years later, so don't worry. I felt like I couldn't kind of control this scale anymore. It's too huge for me as an artist. So I decided to make smaller drill sculptures that I could control. And these are 6 3D printed sculptures made of plastic, which is also, I mean, made of oil, which is nice. And yeah, I mean, once you look at these works out of context, you really, if you don't read the text, I mean, it was really interesting to see all of the kind of different reactions people had to what this is, and really wild, wild interpretations of what these things are. Yeah, but one day I was painting one of these, especially this one in particular. And in order to get all the paint consistent on all sides, you have to kind of spin it on a wheel. And so it turns. And I realized at that moment that, you know, these are drills and they're actually made to have this kind of almost organic animal-like movement, because they are designed in a way to drill the earth. So the movement was so magical and really looked like fingers or claws or something. And I was so mesmerized by it that night I had a dream that there was a drill that was, instead of drilling the earth, was drilling the sky, and it was floating in the air. So I decided to make this work, and it really happened. I will show you. It's really drilling the sky. I hope it's clear. Yeah, I mean, I also want to highlight that that, you know, these works are really animated, not just because they move, but also because of the color. I mean, you can never see the work in the same light. It's always changing color, and there is this kind of very seductive element to it. And yeah, I'm going to go back to the topic of scale after this movement. I decided to go even smaller after that, where I had real natural pearls carved into the shape of oil drills. Of course, this was impossible for me to do myself. Usually it's not possible to carve a pearl because it has a core, and if you carve it, it breaks. But I found this amazing Japanese jewelry maker who developed a pearl carving technique over many years, where he found a specific type of natural pearl that doesn't have a core, and he can carve it. So I sent him a photo of a drill, and I told him it would be possible to make this into a pearl. And lo and behold, a month later, this gets sent to me by post. And I was really shocked how beautiful it was. But the concept behind the work is that I wanted to approach the material of the pearl as a kind of political act, to confront it, but to also kind of mutate it in a way. Our own understanding of history in the region became so distorted after developing into this kind of post-oil society, that I believed we could no longer clearly see or access history anymore, especially kind of the ritual of diving for pearls, or what it meant to be a society based on these objects for so long. So in essence, the work represents this kind of mutated view that the pearl has changed into a drill, and the drill will eventually change into something else. I displayed this work in an aquarium setting on a seashell because I wanted to put the drill back into the sea. But it's an aquarium, so it's also a very artificial environment, which is part of this kind of mutated view of things. And yeah, it's in water. And speaking of water, I also have another work in this field. I wanted to explore what oil was used for before it became a fuel source. And I found out that it was really used for a lot of kind of therapeutic purposes. To this day, people in Azerbaijan, for example, they take a bath in oil because it's an ancient practice that dates to the 6th century, and oil is said to cure many ailments, including skin rashes, bacteria, and even impotence. But recently, health authorities classified this practice as being dangerous and toxic. It still happens, but you're only allowed to take a bath in it for 20 minutes before it becomes harmful to you. And when I was researching this phenomenon, I noticed when people posed for the camera while taking a bath, they would always put their hands up like this, because I mean, you can't put it on your face. So the hands are the kind of nicest part of your body that you can show. And I saw a lot of photos like this, and I had a dream that night that the bathtub was still there and the hands were still there, but the body disappeared. And I decided to turn that into a sculpture just to see what it looked like. I didn't really think about it so much. And I made the sculpture called Deep Float. And yeah, it's, I mean, it looks like liquid, but it's hard plastic. And yeah, it's a weird work. I don't really know what to say about it. It's just my idea of this kind of the future of oil. Some people think it's like morbid and it looks like somebody's drowning in it, but that really wasn't my intention. I really wanted to see, you know, what this would look like. I mean, yeah, will we go back to using this kind of oil therapy? And I wrote this actually a long time ago as kind of my my prediction for the 2020s. So this is what I wrote. Oil is worthless as a fuel source, transforming oil fields into playgrounds for kids and therapeutic spa resorts for the elderly, all thanks to a new full bodysuit that shuts out its poisonous components and absorbs the beneficial petro-bioenergy it exudes. Oil pools are remodeled into swimming pools where synchronized swimming teams splash in wondrous formations. Yes, so I tried to realize this synchronized swimming in oil as a video for a long time, but I don't think a lot of people understood what I was trying to do. But many years in the making, it actually happened. In the end, I filmed a synchronized swimming team in the middle of the sea at night because I wanted the water to look very kind of black and oily, and I juxtaposed it with pearl diving music from the 1960s. And the swimmers are wearing full iridescent bodysuits. Yeah, I'll play a bit of it now. I don't know if you're going to see it clearly because of the connection, but let's try. I'll stop. And so that's just a bit of it. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting work also because of the gender, I think, aspect. You know, pearl diving is an all-male thing, and synchronized swimming is an all-female sport that also emerged like in the 19th century as this kind of water ballet. So it's just merging these very disparate things together to create this artificial but beautiful picture. And so while I was researching and exploring all of these things that are there to be researched and explored about pearls in the region, I discovered a completely different kind of pearl. a pearl that didn't originate from the sea, but from the desert. It's actually a black pearl from outer space. I will explain. Another British explorer named St. John Philby, also in the 1930s, was told there was an ancient city buried in the Empty Quarter desert. The Empty Quarter is this huge orange desert you see there. It's bigger than France. It's split over 4 countries, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the UAE. And anyway, John was told that if he found this ancient city, he would become a rich and famous archaeologist. And so he set out looking for it. This is from his book, The Empty Quarter. In order to kind of assimilate more into his surroundings, he changed his name to Abdullah Philippi and even learned Arabic so he could communicate with locals and convince them to escort him to that area. And these are his entourage from that time. You can see him there in the middle. Needless to say, I mean, the desert is a very treacherous place and the journey was very difficult. This is an infrared image of a section of the Empty Quarter taken by the European Space Station. You can see how the dunes look like, you know, this snake-like pattern, and everywhere you look basically is the same landscape. Not getting lost there is a miraculous feat. Basically, I mean, yeah, you can imagine it's just a sea of sand. I went and filmed there actually, so I know what it's like. And yeah, they were traveling with camels, many of whom died along the way. And this was their route. They were trying to get this to this middle point here called Wabar. And these are some of the photos Philby shot along the way. And finally, in the end, they reached the location after much hardship, and it looked something like this. And Philby describes kind of that moment in his book as, you know, he looked at that mound, which was supposedly these ruins, and he thought it was the mouth of a volcano, and that, you know, that these locals just didn't understand what volcanoes were, basically. And they ran to him with these black pellets that they found all over the landscape and told him, look, these are the pearls of the women who used to live here. Because they believed that these people were an ancient people that were struck and punished by God for their decadence. So that's why the area is destroyed and it's ruins, and but the pearls are still there. Yeah, I was very fascinated by the story because it mixes a lot of my kind of interests together. This is the map of the area. So I made this work that I showed actually last year in January 2020, called Holy Quarter. And it's a video installation of a kind of 20-minute film with about 50 glass sculptures laid in front of it. I wanted to kind of, through this work, expand my vision of pearls into the desert, but also into kind of outer space, to create a kind of science fictional, almost divine religious quality to the whole story. And the idea is that the video is narrated by the sculptures, which is this kind of divine entity. And that while you're watching, you realize that they are the narrators of the story. And I will try to play you a short clip. I don't know if you can see it, but there is something very strange that happened when I made this work, which I will tell you later. Yes, 1 minute. Let me play a short clip.
He knew not whether to laugh or cry at the sight of a place that shattered the dream of years. One could have scarcely imagined a more sensational outcome to the riddle of the great sands. was a deeper riddle, for we were not of the earth, but of the sky. And this was not our first visit. Many, many years ago, we came down once. The people saw our heavenly landing as divine and began to worship us.
I'll stop there. Yeah, I just wanted to say the score is by my sister Fatima Al Qadiri, who's an amazing musician. But I want to mention one thing is that there's one line in this film, and I was writing the script in the end of 2019, and I finished it in January 2020, and I don't know why I included that line, but basically I wrote one of the interesting things that happened was in the script it says, "The world will be ruptured by the great disease." And I have no idea why I wrote that, but it's such a strange thing. But, you know, sometimes artists have this, are connected to some kind of fortune teller aspect of their work. And I know that it happened to a lot of people, actually. That, oh my God, my work was, you know, seeing the future sometimes. I don't know what happened. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And I will leave it there. Thank you.